My name's Diane, and I'm 28 years old. I work remotely as a software engineer. 3 years ago, I made what I believed was the kindest choice of my life. I bought my childhood home to save my parents from foreclosure and let my entire family live there without paying rent. I truly thought I was being the perfect daughter and sister. I never imagined that the people I loved most would conspire to steal from me, manipulate me, and eventually try to force me out of my own home. But when I accidentally opened my laptop one morning, right after my sister smashed my favorite mug and yelled at me to leave, I uncovered something that changed everything forever. Before we get into this story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Please remember to like and subscribe if you haven't yet, because what I'm about to share will show you exactly how I turned the tables on my toxic family and regained control of my life. Trust me, you don't want to miss how this all plays out. Let me set the scene for you. After I earned my computer science degree, I got an incredible remote job at a tech company. The salary was fantastic for my age, and I was living my dream. At the same time, my parents were in a tough financial spot. Dad had lost his manufacturing job, and Mom's part-time retail work wasn't enough to cover the mortgage. When they told me they might lose the house I grew up in, it broke my heart. This wasn't just any house. It was where I took my first steps, where I celebrated every birthday, where I studied for my SATs at the kitchen table. The thought of strangers living in my childhood bedroom or my mom losing the beautiful garden she'd spent decades tending to was unbearable. So, I made them an offer they couldn't refuse. I would buy the house from the bank, pay off their debt, and let them continue to live there for free. No rent, no utilities, no property taxes. I'd handle it all. All I asked in return was for them to treat the house with respect and maybe help with some maintenance, since my long work hours would be dedicated to affording the mortgage and all the other expenses. At the time, my sister Jessica, who is 25, was also living at home. She had dropped out of college after 2 semesters, claiming it wasn't for her, and had been bouncing between temporary jobs ever since. Most recently, she had been unemployed for about 8 months, spending her days sleeping until noon and her evenings with friends or watching Netflix in the living room. I thought having the whole family together would be wonderful. We could support one another, share meals, and I could help Jessica get back on her feet. I even offered to pay for her to take online courses or certifications that might help her find a better job. She seemed grateful initially, thanking me repeatedly and promising she would help out however she could. The first year went pretty smoothly. My parents were extremely grateful, constantly thanking me and making sure the house was clean and tidy. Mom would cook my favorite meals, and Dad would handle yard work and minor repairs without me even asking. Jessica was quieter back then, mostly keeping to herself and occasionally helping with dishes or laundry. But as time went on, I began to notice a shift. Jessica started treating the house more like a hotel than a family home. She would invite friends over without permission, sometimes having loud parties that went on until the early morning. When I would politely ask her to keep the noise down because I had important work calls the next day, she'd roll her eyes and mumble something about me being too serious. The messes also began to get worse. Jessica would leave dirty dishes in the sink for days, use my expensive skincare products without asking, and borrow my clothes without permission. When I brought these things up during family dinners, my parents would make excuses for her. "She's still figuring things out," Mom would say. "You know how hard it is for young people to find good jobs these days." I tried to be understanding. I remembered being in my early 20s and feeling lost about my own career path. But what bothered me most was that Jessica didn't seem to be trying at all. She would sleep until noon, scroll through social media for hours, and then complain about being bored when I suggested job applications or volunteer work. She would get defensive and accuse me of being judgmental. The final straw should have been when she started bringing different guys home several nights a week. I would wake up to find strangers in my kitchen, using my coffee, eating my food, and sometimes even showering in my bathroom. When I tried to set some basic house rules about overnight guests, Jessica exploded. "This is my home too," she screamed. "You can't control every aspect of our lives just because you pay the bills. We're not your servants." My parents sided with her completely. Dad actually told me I was being unreasonable and needed to remember this was a family home, not my personal kingdom. Mom suggested I was probably just stressed from work and should try to be more flexible and understanding of Jessica's social needs. I was paying for everything. The mortgage, property taxes, homeowners insurance, utilities, groceries, household supplies, and even the streaming services Jessica used every day. I had also paid for new appliances when the old ones broke, a new roof when we had a leak, and regular maintenance to keep the house in perfect condition. In 3 years, I had probably invested over $200,000 to keep my family comfortable and secure. But instead of gratitude, I was met with attitude. Instead of respect, I received resentment. And instead of the close family relationship I dreamed of, I was walking on eggshells in my own home, afraid to set any boundaries because it would trigger another family meeting about how controlling and ungrateful I was becoming. The morning everything exploded started like any other terrible day in what had become my increasingly stressful life. I had barely slept because Jessica and her friends had decided to have an impromptu party in the backyard that lasted until 3 o'clock in the morning. The music was so loud I could feel the bass thumping through my bedroom walls. And every time I thought it was finally over, I'd hear more laughter and shouting. I had an extremely important video call scheduled with a potential client at 9 a.m. This wasn't just any client either. It was a major corporation that could potentially give our company a contract worth over $500,000. Had been preparing for this presentation for weeks and knew that landing this deal could mean a promotion and a significant salary increase. When my alarm went off at 7, I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. My eyes were burning from lack of sleep. My head was pounding, and I could barely think straight, but I dragged myself out of bed knowing I needed to look professional and alert for the most important call of my career. I stumbled to the kitchen to make coffee, desperately needing caffeine to function. But when I reached for my favorite mug, the one I used every single morning for work calls because it was the perfect size and had a comfortable handle, it wasn't there. This wasn't just any mug. It was a custom piece I had bought from a local artist with a beautiful design and my initials engraved on the bottom. It was my good luck charm for important meetings. I searched through all the cabinets, thinking maybe someone had put it away in the wrong place. I checked the dishwasher, the drying rack, even the dining room where we sometimes had coffee during family meals. Nothing. My stress level was rising by the minute as I realized I only had 90 minutes to prepare for my presentation, and I was already feeling scattered and anxious. That's when I heard Jessica's music start up again from her bedroom. Not only had she kept me awake all night, but now she was playing music loud enough to potentially interfere with my call. I took a deep breath and decided to check her room, thinking maybe she'd borrowed my mug and forgotten to return it. I knocked on her door first, but there was no response over the loud music. After waiting a few minutes, I opened the door slightly and called her name. Jessica was sprawled across her unmade bed, still wearing yesterday's clothes, surrounded by empty pizza boxes, soda cans, and various items that clearly didn't belong to her. And there, sitting on her nightstand next to a half-eaten slice of pizza and an overflowing ashtray, was my mug. It was stained with what looked like red wine and had lipstick marks around the rim. The sight of my beautiful personalized mug being treated like garbage made something snap inside me. "Jessica," I said, my voice carefully controlled. "I need my mug back. I have an important work call in an hour." She looked up at me with blurry, bloodshot eyes and made a face like I'd asked her to donate a kidney. "God, Diane, it's just a stupid mug. Use something else." "It's not just a mug," I replied, trying to stay calm. "It's mine, and I need it for my presentation. Please give it back." That's when Jessica completely lost it. She sat up in bed and started screaming at me like I'd committed some terrible crime. "Are you seriously waking me up over a freaking mug? You're so obsessed with your little work things. Not everything revolves around your precious job." I could hear my parents' footsteps coming down the hallway, drawn by Jessica's shouting. Within seconds, they were both standing in the doorway, and I foolishly thought they were coming to help defuse the situation. Instead, Mom immediately went to Jessica's side and started stroking her hair. "What's wrong, sweetheart? Why is everyone yelling?" "Diane is being crazy about some mug," Jessica whined, her voice taking on that manipulative tone she'd perfected over the years. She barged into my room and started demanding I give her stuff back like I'm some kind of thief. Dad crossed his arms and looked at me disapprovingly. Diane, you know Jessica needs her sleep. She's been going through a rough time lately with the job market being so difficult. Can't you just use a different mug? I felt like I was losing my mind. Here I was, the person paying for everything, being lectured about being considerate while my sister had kept me awake all night and stolen my personal belongings. But I tried one more time to be reasonable. I just need my mug back, I said quietly. I'm not trying to cause problems. I have a really important call this morning and this mug is special to me. Jessica can use any of the other mugs in the kitchen. That's when Jessica grabbed my mug and held it up threateningly. You want your precious mug so badly. Fine. And before I could react, she hurled it against the wall with all her strength. The sound of my beautiful mug shattering was like a gunshot in the small room. Pieces of ceramic scattered everywhere, and I watched in horror as something that had taken an artist hours to create was destroyed in a split second out of pure spite. But Jessica wasn't done. She jumped out of bed and got right in my face, screaming at the top of her lungs. There's your stupid mug. Maybe now you'll stop being such a controlling brat about everything. Get out of your own house, you spoiled idiot. Nobody wants you here anyway. I stood there in complete shock, surrounded by the pieces of my broken mug, while my sister screamed profanities at me. And my parents said absolutely nothing to defend me. In fact, Mom was still comforting Jessica, telling her to calm down and that everything would be okay. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just about a mug anymore. This was about my family watching my sister destroy my property and verbally abuse me in my own home, and their response was to comfort her and treat me like the problem. I bent down and started picking up the pieces of my mug with shaking hands, trying not to cry in front of them. Each shard felt like another piece of my heart breaking as I realized that the family I had sacrificed everything for didn't respect me at all. I left Jessica's room without saying another word and went straight to my bedroom, closing the door behind me and finally letting the tears fall. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the broken pieces of my mug, and my chest felt tight with a mixture of rage, hurt, and complete disbelief at what had just happened. The logical part of my brain knew I needed to pull myself together for my presentation, but I was in no emotional state to discuss million-dollar contracts with potential clients. I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop to send an email postponing the meeting, knowing it might cost me the deal, but unable to function after such a devastating blow. But as my laptop screen came to life, something immediately caught my attention. The browser was open to a page I had never visited, and there were multiple tabs showing websites I had never seen before. My heart started racing as I realized someone else had been using my computer, the one device I had always kept private and secure with my work files and personal information. I clicked through the browser history, and what I found made my stomach drop. Jessica had been using my laptop regularly, apparently whenever I was out of the house or sleeping. But she wasn't just browsing social media or watching videos. She was conducting business, and that business involved selling my belongings. There were dozens of eBay listings featuring items from around the house. My designer handbags, jewelry I had inherited from my grandmother, expensive electronics I had bought for my home office, even some of my professional wardrobe. The listings showed sold items totaling thousands of dollars, all being shipped from my address using my name as the seller. But that was just the beginning. As I dug deeper, I found that Jessica had created fake social media profiles using my photos and personal information. On these accounts, she was pretending to be me, posting about her exciting life as a successful software engineer, showing off expensive purchases and vacations that I had never taken. The most disturbing discovery was a series of credit card and loan applications submitted in my name. Jessica had been using my social security number, employment information, and financial details to try to secure credit cards and personal loans. Some of the applications had been approved, meaning there were credit accounts open in my name that I knew nothing about. My hands were trembling as I took screenshots of everything, creating a digital paper trail of what was clearly identity theft on a massive scale. But the emotional damage came when I found Jessica's private messages with her friends, where she was bragging about how easy it was to manipulate her stupid sister into paying for everything. In one group chat she had written, "Diane is such a pushover. She actually thinks I'm grateful for her generosity. She has no idea I've been selling her stuff for months. The idiot leaves her laptop unlocked all the time." Another message read, "My parents are totally on board with the plan. We figure if we make Diane miserable enough, she'll eventually move out and leave us the house. Then we can rent out rooms and actually make money instead of just living here for free." There were screenshots of conversations where Jessica had coached her friends on how to be extra loud and disruptive when they came over, specifically to stress me out and make me uncomfortable in my own home. She had even planned the previous night's party, knowing I had an important presentation, hoping to sabotage my work performance. But the most heartbreaking discovery was a text thread between Jessica and my parents. Mom had written, "Make sure you clean out more of Diane's stuff this week while she's focused on that big work project. She won't notice if things go missing gradually." Dad had responded, "Good thinking, and keep pushing her buttons about the house rules. If she gets angry enough, we can play the victim and make her feel guilty for being so controlling." Jessica had replied, "Already on it. I'm going to start bringing more guys over and making more noise at night. If she complains, you guys just stick to the script about me needing space to figure out my life." I sat staring at my laptop screen, feeling like my entire world had collapsed around me. This wasn't just my sister being immature or my parents enabling bad behavior. This was a calculated plan to exploit my generosity, steal my identity, drain my finances, and ultimately drive me out of my own home so they could take it over completely. Every argument, every guilt trip, every time they had made me feel like I was being unreasonable for wanting basic respect in my own house had been part of an elaborate manipulation scheme. They had been plotting against me for months, maybe even years, while I had been working myself to death to provide for them and worrying about their happiness and well-being. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Jessica had stolen thousands of dollars worth of my belongings, committed identity theft, damaged my credit, and coordinated with my parents to systematically abuse my trust and generosity. And they had all been laughing about it behind my back, treating me like a fool who deserved to be taken advantage of. But as the initial shock began to wear off, something else started rising up inside me. It wasn't sadness anymore. It wasn't hurt or betrayal. It was cold, calculating anger. And with it came a clarity I had never experienced before. For the first time in my life, I could see my family exactly as they were, not as I had always hoped they could be. And I knew exactly what I was going to do about it. My tears had stopped, and my hands had stopped shaking. I sat at my laptop with the focus and determination I usually reserved for solving complex coding problems, methodically documenting every piece of evidence I had discovered. This wasn't about emotion anymore. This was about building an airtight case and preparing for war. I started by taking detailed screenshots of every browser tab, every message, every fraudulent listing, and every credit application. I organized everything into folders on my desktop, creating a chronological timeline of Jessica's theft and fraud activities. Some of the eBay sales dated back almost 18 months, meaning this had been going on for much longer than I had initially realized. Next, I logged into my credit monitoring accounts and discovered the true extent of the financial damage. Jessica had successfully opened 3 credit cards in my name with a combined limit of $15,000. 2 of them were maxed out with purchases I had never made, including expensive electronics, designer clothes, and even cash advances. My credit score had dropped significantly due to missed payments on accounts I didn't know existed. I found receipts in my email for items I had never ordered, all shipped to various addresses around town that I assumed belonged to Jessica's friends. She had been smart enough not to ship everything to our house, probably to avoid me seeing packages arrive. The total value of confirmed stolen items and fraudulent charges was approaching $20,000. But the financial theft was just part of the picture. I needed to understand the full scope of their plan. So, I continued reading through Jessica's messages and my parents' text conversations. What I discovered was a level of premeditation that shocked me even in my current state of disillusionment. They had been researching tenant rights, trying to figure out if they could claim legal residency in my house and make it difficult for me to evict them. Jessica had even contacted a sketchy lawyer about the possibility of adverse possession, the legal concept where someone can claim ownership of property under certain circumstances. My parents had been encouraging her to establish a longer residence history and to document any improvements she made to the house, no matter how minor. They had taken photos of Jessica painting her bedroom and reorganizing the basement, creating a fake narrative that she was contributing to the property's value and maintenance. The plan was sophisticated and malicious. They wanted to push me to the breaking point emotionally while simultaneously making it legally complicated for me to remove them from the house. Jessica's outbursts and disrespectful behavior weren't just immaturity. They were calculated attempts to provoke me into actions they could later use against me. I realized that this morning's mug incident wasn't random either. Jessica had been escalating her behavior deliberately, probably hoping I would lose my temper and do something they could characterize as abusive or unstable. If I had screamed back at her or tried to physically retrieve my property, they would have had their evidence of me being an unfit homeowner who was hostile to her own family. But I hadn't taken the bait. Instead, I had quietly gathered the evidence and remained calm. And now I had everything I needed to destroy their scheme completely. I spent the next 2 hours researching identity theft laws, property rights, and fraud penalties. I contacted my lawyer friend, Sarah, through an encrypted messaging app and sent her a summary of the situation along with key pieces of evidence. Her response was immediate and reassuring. "This is a slam dunk case. You have enough evidence for criminal charges and civil recovery. Don't confront them yet. Let me walk you through the best strategy." Following Sarah's advice, I discreetly installed security cameras in common areas of the house using equipment I ordered for same-day delivery. I changed all my passwords, enabled two-factor authentication on every account, and set up fraud alerts with my bank and credit card companies. I also created a detailed inventory of my remaining possessions, photographing everything of value and researching replacement costs. If this situation escalated to legal action, I wanted documentation of everything they could potentially steal or damage in retaliation. The most important step was securing my finances. I opened a new bank account at a different institution and began transferring money to protect it from any potential fraudulent access. I also gathered all my important documents, including the house deed, insurance policies, and financial records, storing copies in a safety deposit box they couldn't access. By late afternoon, I had transformed from a victim into a prosecutor. Every piece of evidence was organized, every legal option was researched, and every asset was protected. I had even practiced my confrontation speech in the mirror, making sure I could deliver the devastating news of their exposure without betraying any emotion. Jessica and my parents thought they were dealing with the same pushover they had been manipulating for years. They had no idea that the woman who had been crying over a broken mug that morning had spent the day building an unbreakable case against them. It was time to let them know that their game was over. I emerged from my bedroom at exactly 6 o'clock, carrying a manila folder containing printed copies of all the evidence I had gathered. Jessica was lounging on my couch watching Netflix on my television, wearing one of my sweaters that she had apparently borrowed without permission. My parents were in the kitchen preparing dinner with groceries I had paid for, acting as if nothing unusual had happened that morning. The scene was so perfectly normal, so utterly ordinary that it almost made me laugh. Here they were, living their comfortable lives, funded entirely by my hard work while secretly plotting to steal everything I owned and drive me out of my own home. The audacity was breathtaking. "I need everyone in the living room," I announced calmly. "We need to have a family meeting." Jessica rolled her eyes without looking away from the TV. "Can it wait? I'm watching something." "No," I replied, my voice steady and controlled. "It cannot wait. Turn off the television now." Something in my tone must have registered because Jessica actually looked at me for the first time. Whatever she saw in my expression made her reach for the remote and mute the TV, though she kept the picture on in a small act of defiance. My parents came into the living room, wiping their hands on kitchen towels, looking mildly annoyed at being interrupted during dinner preparation. Mom sat down on the couch next to Jessica, while Dad remained standing with his arms crossed, clearly expecting this to be another conversation about household rules that they could dismiss and minimize. I remained standing as well, holding my folder like a prosecutor addressing a jury. The power dynamic in the room had shifted completely, though they didn't realize it yet. This morning, Jessica destroyed my property and told me to get out of my own house. I began, my voice calm and measured. You both witnessed this and chose to comfort her rather than address her behavior. But that incident led me to discover something much more serious. I opened the folder and pulled out the first set of documents. Jessica, for the past 18 months, you've been using my laptop to sell my personal belongings online without my knowledge or permission. The total value of stolen items currently exceeds $12,000. Jessica's face went white, but she tried to maintain her defiant posture. I don't know what you're talking about. I placed printouts of the eBay listings on the coffee table in front of her. Each one clearly showed items from our house with her seller account information. These are screenshots from your eBay account using your email address and your PayPal account for payment processing. The items were shipped from this address using my name. Mom leaned forward to look at the papers, her expression shifting from annoyance to confusion to growing alarm. Jessica, what is this? But I wasn't finished. I pulled out the next set of documents. More seriously, Jessica has been committing identity theft by opening credit accounts in my name. She successfully fraudulently obtained 3 credit cards with a combined limit of $15,000, 2 of which are currently maxed out. Dad's arms uncrossed as he stared at the credit applications bearing my personal information, but Jessica's handwriting. The evidence was undeniable and overwhelming. She's also created fake social media profiles using my photos and information, representing herself as me to her friends and potential romantic partners. This constitutes identity fraud in addition to the financial crimes. Jessica tried to speak, but I held up my hand to stop her. But what makes this truly devastating is that you've all been working together to orchestrate this fraud while pretending to be grateful for my support. I pulled out the final and most damaging evidence, printouts of their text message conversations and Jessica's group chats with her friends. I read selected quotes aloud, watching their faces as they realized the full extent of their exposure. From Jessica to her friends. Diane is such a pushover. She actually thinks I'm grateful for her generosity. She has no idea I've been selling her stuff for months. Jessica's defiance crumbled as she recognized her own words being read back to her. From Mom to Jessica, make sure you clean out more of Diane's stuff this week while she's focused on that big work project. She won't notice if things go missing gradually. Mom's face flushed red as she realized their private family conspiracy had been completely exposed. And from Dad, keep pushing her buttons about the house rules. If she gets angry enough, we can play the victim and make her feel guilty for being so controlling. The silence in the room was deafening. All 3 of them sat staring at the evidence of their betrayal, unable to deny or minimize what they had done because their own words were staring back at them in black and white. Jessica tried one last desperate attempt at manipulation. Diane, I can explain everything. I was going through a really hard time and I made some mistakes, but... No, I interrupted, my voice cutting through her excuses like a blade. These weren't mistakes. This was a coordinated criminal conspiracy involving identity theft, fraud, and grand larceny. According to my research, the combined charges could result in several years in prison and tens of thousands of dollars in fines. Dad finally found his voice. Now, Diane, let's not get carried away. We're family. We can work this out without involving lawyers or police. I looked at him with newfound clarity about who he really was. We stopped being family the moment you chose to participate in stealing from me rather than protecting me. You've been enabling and encouraging Jessica's criminal behavior while pretending to love and support me. Mom started crying, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of panic as she realized the consequences of their actions were about to become very real. I pulled out one final document, a formal eviction notice I had prepared with Sarah's help. Jessica, you have 48 hours to remove all of your belongings from this house. Any attempt to take items that don't belong to you will result in additional theft charges. Jessica's mouth fell open in shock. You can't kick me out. This is my home too. No, I replied firmly. This is my house. I own it. I pay for it, and I have every legal right to determine who lives here. You've forfeited any claim to residency through your criminal actions. I turned to my parents. You have a choice. You can respect my rules and my authority as the homeowner, or you can leave with Jessica. But your days of treating me like a doormat while stealing from me are over permanently. The three of them sat in stunned silence, finally understanding that their victim had become their judge and the verdict was not going to be in their favor. The next 48 hours transformed my house from a battlefield into a carefully controlled crime scene. I documented everything with my newly installed security cameras, ensuring that every interaction and every item removal was recorded for potential legal proceedings. Jessica's response to the eviction notice was predictably dramatic. She alternated between tearful apologies, angry threats, and desperate attempts to negotiate a compromise. But I remained unmoved by all of it, having finally seen her true nature revealed in those text messages and social media posts. Where am I supposed to go? She wailed on the first morning, surrounded by garbage bags and cardboard boxes. I don't have any money saved up. You have $12,000 worth of money from selling my belongings, I replied calmly. Plus, whatever you've spent on the credit cards you opened in my name. That should be enough for a security deposit and several months of rent. She tried to claim she had already spent all the money, but I had done my homework. Bank records showed large cash deposits in her account that corresponded with the dates of her eBay sales. She had the resources to support herself. She had just been choosing to steal from me instead of using her own ill-gotten gains. My parents attempted to play mediator, suggesting family counseling and payment plans for restitution. But their text messages had revealed their true role in the conspiracy, and I was no longer willing to pretend they were innocent bystanders caught in the middle. You actively participated in planning and executing this fraud, I told Dad when he approached me. You're just as guilty as she is.